let's take you now live to a press conference where Michaelia Cash and Opposition Leader Peter Dutton are speaking.
And now basically running the construction industry in Australia, Australians, mum and dad taxpayers, are paying up to 30% more for their publicly funded infrastructure. That's the hospitals, the roads and the schools. And quite frankly, what we saw last night in relation to the allegations against women was utterly disgusting. Well, quite frankly, enough is now enough. Mr Albanese, as a weak Prime Minister who is completely beholden to the CFMEU, has shown that he will not take action that will properly address this problem. Enough is enough. A Dutton government will. We are going to announce today a suite of actions that will quite literally hit organised crime where it hurts and break their business model with the CFMEU. The first thing we will do, and we call on Mr Albanese to work with us because we could do this next week when the Parliament sits, is to once and for all deregister the CFMEU. Mr Albanese has shown by putting it into administration that he will take the weakest possible response possible. It is almost laughable to see government ministers out there today saying that administration is working. Well, if administration is working, God help the Australian people. God help women on construction sites. But more than that, why are thousands and thousands of dollars still exchanging hands on these construction sites around Australia? You need to comprehensively, once and for all, deregister the CFMEU, but also at the same time ensure that any official that has indulged in law breaking is never again allowed to hold office in a registered organisation or go anywhere near a work site and represent the workers. We also need urgently to put back in place the building industry regulator, the ABCC, which Mr Albanese, as you all know, his first act of government was to do exactly what the CFME wanted him to do, and that was to get rid of the building industry watchdog. Again, we will work with Mr Albanese next week to urgently reinstate the building industry watchdog. But we will also smash organised crime right at its very heart. We will introduce laws that will allow the police to target the kingpins and the bosses. The laws that we currently have in Australia only allow the police to target the individual themselves who have committed the crime. And as we all know, when it comes to kingpins, when it comes to bosses of organised crime, they often don't get their hands dirty. These laws have worked well in the United States and America. Decades ago, they were introduced to combat the mafia influence, in particular in labour organisations across the United States. So we will introduce these laws which will allow our police to target the criminal organisation that has itself been involved in a pattern of law breaking. We are going to break open the business model and smash it that organised crime has been running with the CFMEU in this country. We're going to give the construction industry back to the Australian taxpayer because ultimately this is all about mum and dad and the money, the extra money they are paying for infrastructure in this country.
Thank you very much, Michaelia. The CFMEU is not a union, it is a criminal enterprise. And its business model is not like that of reputable unions like the Nurses Federation or the Australian Workers Union, who take fees from their members to represent their interests. Their business model is much more like the mafia. They take protection money from building sites and building companies in order to keep the peace. The primary beneficiaries of this corrupt model are underworld figures like Mick Gatto and organised outlaw motorcycle gangs like the Comancheros and the Rebels. And it is Australian and Victorian taxpayers who bear the brunt of this business model, not just in their higher taxes for increased costs of infrastructure projects, but through the lawlessness and terror that we see in our streets and our suburbs. Because when someone engages in a home invasion or a carjacking, inevitably that car that is stolen is ultimately purchased by an outlaw motorcycle gang. The kids who are engaging in these crimes are provided drugs trafficked by these outlaw motorcycle gangs. And it is because of the weakness of Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party that this business model has flourished on his watch. As Michaelia said, one of his first acts in government was to abolish the ABCC, to unleash the CFMEU and their organised mates in crime on building sites, ripping off taxpayers. A Dutton coalition government will take a very different approach because we're not beholden to the CFMEU for our funding in election campaigns. We will introduce a range of measures that Michaelia has already outlined and, in addition, also stand up a new federally funded AFP-led criminal task force to tackle organised crime in the building industry. It will not just involve the AFP, but other key law enforcement and intelligence agencies at the federal level, including the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, the Australian Taxation Office, and the financial crimes regulator, AUSTRAC. Because we are determined to bust this business model once and for all, deliver safer work sites for Australians, and affordable infrastructure projects that aren't blown out by paying bikies $10,000 a week, not even to show up. Peter.
James, thank you. Look, we've taken this very seriously, and I want to say thank you to Michaelia and James for all of the work that they've put into this. We've essentially got organised crime figures running the construction sector in this country. This is the biggest corruption scandal in our country's history because we are talking about billions of dollars that are being paid by ultimately Australian taxpayers through the Victorian government, through the Albanese government, for bloated prices. Project times are being blown out, the costs are escalating, and for every kilometre of road that's being built or every hospital that's being built, there's a 30% CFMEU tax, at least. By the accounts of some of the developers and builders, it could be closer to 100%. So Australian taxpayers are being ripped off here. And what we saw in the United States with the mafia in control and the Teamsters and the relationship that existed there, it's essentially been adopted by crime figures here in Australia. The outlaw motorcycle gang members are intertwined with members of the CFMEU. The CFMEU has donated $11.5 million to Mr Albanese's party and to Ms Allen's party. They are completely and utterly compromised, and the corruption here goes to the heart of the Albanese government. The Albanese government has known for years about the CFMEU, about the abuse and the violence against women, about the extortion, about the links to the outlaw motorcycle gangs. All of that has been fully known to ministers in the Albanese government, and yet they've done nothing about it. Now, why this is really important to Australians, and I think particularly to Victorians at the moment, is that when homes are getting broken into by kids who are stealing money or stealing valuables to sell, they're fueling a drug habit. They're buying drugs from outlaw motorcycle gang members who are the biggest distributors of amphetamines and drugs in our country. They're stealing cars from your home at the moment because there is a market that's been created by outlaw motorcycle gangs who are rebirthing these vehicles stolen from mums and dads who have worked hard here in Victoria and across the country. That is the other limb of the outlaw motorcycle gang business model. And the CFMEU, by paying figures, shadowy figures and extortion payments to the outlaw motorcycle gang members, that's fueling that criminal enterprise. Now, the Prime Minister stood up this faux administration model, which has only seen the CFMEU go from strength to strength. There are some individuals who are being employed now by building companies who work for the CFMEU. What are they doing? There are builders who are intimidated and feel that they can't provide information to the police because they feel that they are physically threatened by these outlaw motorcycle gang members who are doing the enforcement activities, who are the hired muscle for the CFMEU. We are literally wasting billions of dollars of taxpayers' money through this corrupt model, which is sanctioned by Anthony Albanese. The Prime Minister has no interest in clearing it up because he is the financial beneficiary, his party is the financial beneficiary of the donations of the CFMEU. The CFMEU still sits on the national executive of the Australian Labor Party. The CFMEU is not going anywhere, and that's why they need to be deregistered and bring in a union like the AWU to provide the important work, particularly on building sites around workplace health and safety. We think that is very important. We want safe workplace environments, but workplaces aren't safe at the moment with the CFMEU because of the assaults that are taking place. The productivity is down to less than 3 days a week. And this is an organisation which is flourishing because the Albanese government has allowed it to do so. Now, we're going to clean it up, and the RICO-style laws worked in the United States and they can work here in Australia as well. So this is not just a blow against the outlaw motorcycle gangs' activities in the CFMEU, it's also a blow against drug importations, stolen vehicle rackets, and it will reduce crime across society in our country. And it is the most significant step that's been taken by government or opposition in recent history. It will make sure that we have the ability for the police to crush these networks. And if we do that, we can try and address the housing crisis that Labor's created in this country. One of the reasons that you're paying through the roof for builders and tradespeople at the moment is because of the CFMEU, a corrupt model which is sanctioned by a corrupt government in the Albanese government. This is the biggest corruption scandal in our country's history, and we should take it very seriously, and that's exactly what we do today. I'm very happy to take any questions.